teenagers are most afraid of is being judged or rejected by their peers, or even sometimes even their family or their parents, their loved ones. And so that's where, when we can figure out what is that belief is something related to some form of fear. There's other variations: fear of failure, fear of success.
Welcome to the Generation Youth Podcast. This is James again. I'm back again with another guest. How did we connect? Tell me again, Laura, how we connected. Was it through social media? How did we connect?
I think it was like my people found your people, something like that, where they found you.
And audience, you're going to love our conversation today, because you have two people who are in the world of youth life coaching that are passionate about what they do, that are going to sit around and just talk to each other about the need for it in a great way. And I hope there's going to be some action steps that we can provide to you guys about how you can help your child grow in confidence and be happy and healthier and more confident in their life. But before we do that, my audience wants to know who you are. They would love to meet you, and they get tired of hearing me talk. So if you wouldn't mind, take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself to the Generation Youth audience.
Absolutely. So I'm Laura Ollinger. I am the mom of 4 children, all teenagers, 13 through 17. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm originally from the Midwest, from St. Louis, Missouri, and I am a teen and parent well-being coach. So I work with teens and their parents on all the things that you've talked about, anything from conflict resolution to confidence building to relationship improvement, anything like that.
So how did you get interested in becoming a teen and parent well-being coach?
Yeah. Oh, great question. So when my oldest daughter, who is now a senior in high school, was in elementary school, she started dealing with some anxiety. And I, started doing all my research and trying to get help and trying to figure out what to do and how to help her. And simultaneously, I was actually back in school getting a master's degree, a master's in health and wellness education, and also a health coaching certification. So I'm actually a functional medicine health coach. And so I'm a nationally board certified health and wellness coach. And so initially I thought, when I was going to be doing the health coaching stuff, it would be kind of very much physically related. Like, a lot of health coaches deal with weight loss or, kind of sleep issues or anything you can think of that's like physically related. But more and more, it became so apparent, the connection between anxiety and physical health. And shortly after that, this was, a process that unfolded over time, just like, life goes. And I had a very sad kind of like, that's not even the word, but like the most painful thing a family can experience, which is we lost my nephew to suicide. And it was my oldest sister's firstborn. So he was the first grandchild of the family. And that's when I just knew, I knew this was going to be the focus, because I was already kind of learning about mental health and learning how to support mental health. And so that's when I realized, gosh, I'm the mom of, at the time they were much younger, but, going to be adolescents. And I wanted to have these skills, honestly, personally for myself. But then I'm like, I feel like it just felt like my calling, like to put it out there and start sharing what I've learned and sharing kind of our experience and sharing, just helping people learn how to deal with the pressures that teenagers are facing these days.
Oh, I love that aspect. When you were talking about her being in middle school when she was going through, that would be what, 5 years ago? 6 years ago?
Well, no, it actually started in elementary school.
Elementary school. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what are the issues and problems that you see young people facing, in which coming to a coach like yourself can help them through? What are some of these problems and issues? Because I know what happens when we start talking about this stuff. A lot of people who are listening start rolling their eyes and saying, oh, they're doing that coaching stuff. Everybody has to have a coach these days. Those coaches, that's a big term. It's a buzzword. And they don't understand how it can help. So let's help them connect the dots. What is it actually, the issues that a young person has that a coach can help with versus maybe someone like a therapist can help them with?
Yeah, well, there is honestly some overlap, because cognitive behavioral therapy, which is kind of the mainstream type of therapy, we are talking about the thoughts that we're having, and our thoughts create our feelings create our behaviors create the results in our lives. And whenever those results are then feed back into the thoughts, it reinforces the thought, whether that's a positive thought or a negative thought. So there is a little bit of overlap just as far as kind of like how we function as humans. But there is then the difference where I will take what the thought is and we kind of figure out what is the belief. And so when
Mm.
we see teenagers, and it's with everyone, all humans, but we all have these beliefs that we're not even aware of them. We're not consciously aware that we have these beliefs. We might be, but generally we're operating, we have like 70,000 thoughts a day, right? Like you're not even aware of all your thoughts. It's like happening in the background, like a computer program is just running in the background. And so the way a coach can help is kind of unearth or discover what those limiting beliefs are. That's another buzzword that you might hear a lot of, but it can also be what I also refer to as automatic negative thoughts, where it's just these things that are happening and over, like I've said. But those are the things that are limiting us. Those are the things that are getting in the way. And so almost everything relates back to like kind of the common denominator is some type of fear. It all comes back to some type of fear, and it's like the top fear is like fear of rejection. So if you've heard about the fear of public speaking, like most people would rather die than be a public speaker, right? And where that comes from is that fear of rejection.
So at a
You're
funeral,
laughing.
most people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. So
Oh,
that's the
totally. Yes, yes.
they'd rather be dead than giving their eulogy and stuff.
Yeah, because you're putting yourself in such a vulnerable position of judgment. And so that is what teenagers are most afraid of, is being judged or rejected by their peers, or even sometimes even their family or their parents, their loved ones. And so that's where, when we can figure out what is that belief is something related to some form of fear. There's other variations: fear of failure, fear of success, just even kind of that self-doubt is all coming back to the fear. And so if we can start to poke holes in their theories, right? So that it's just kind of like when I explain what a belief is, it's really just a theory. A theory isn't necessarily true, it's just a theory. I almost play like lawyer, where I start to ask all the questions and I go in every direction and I start to poke holes in their theory. Like, is it absolutely true that this person doesn't like you? Let's just say that's the example. I don't know if that's a good one. And I'm like, what is do you have proof? Oh, they looked at me the wrong way. Oh, could it be that look meant they had a stomach ache? Well, yeah, I guess it could mean that. Could it be, what are some other reasons why that person could look at you in a bad way? Oh, maybe they had a headache. Yes. Okay, what else? And we could come up with 100 other theories, right, to like disprove their original belief. And so once we get them to even doubt it, sometimes we don't need 100 other things. Just as like two is good, if we can get them to realize that their original theory or belief is not, we can't prove it in a court of law, then their thinking expands. So right now, like, their thinking is very limited, it's very contracted, it's very focused on the negative. And really what that's doing is that's protecting themselves. It's a form of protection, right? So that we're not putting ourselves in that position of being the one to be hurt, that fear of rejection. And so once we kind of can expand our view, oh, maybe that person had a stomach ache. Maybe it's not that they don't like me. Maybe that was the case, right? Then we can start to kind of build the other things, like kind of put in the positives. Maybe that person actually does like you. Maybe they're afraid of you. Oh, I didn't think of it that way. Is it possible that could be true? Well, I guess maybe it's possible, right? And so we have these, and so this is what coaching is about. It's about allowing them to consider other possibilities. And when they consider the other possibilities, then that shifts their entire nervous system. It shifts how they feel. It shifts what their behaviors are, how they show up. So they go to class the next day, and maybe in the past, they're not making eye contact. They're looking down because they think this person doesn't like them, whatever. And now, oh, is it possible, right? So then, oh, we start to look up. Maybe we smile. Maybe we say, hey, how you doing? Right? And so then it starts to reinforce a new, right? Maybe that person says hi back. And then we have a whole entirely new thing. So that's the long version of how coaches can help.
I love that. And one of the things that came to mind when you were saying that was a quote by Zig Ziglar. It's probably one of my favorite quotes that he had, the legendary Zig Ziglar, Dallas based, when he was a speaker. He said, you are what you are and where you are by what goes into your mind. And you can change what you are and you can change where you are by changing what goes into your mind. And so today, there are so many things that are feeding into a young person's mind there's so much clutter. They're just reacting to this world we created for them. They don't know how to handle it because we don't know how to handle it. So we're not teaching it to them. So we have to give them that filter in which to get the right things in. So I love that aspect of it. How does it work? What's the process that you use to help a young person get this kind of mindset, to have that shift?
Yeah, that's a great question also. So when I learned the health coaching kind of part of it, they
Hmm.
taught me a process called motivational interviewing. So
Oh, yeah.
that's where the thing I love about motivational interviewing is that there's no pressure. And so it's all about kind of finding the pros and the cons of every way that they're thinking, right? So let's take, for example, smoking, right? Terrible habit. I totally don't believe in it. But let's just say, and this is just all hypothetical to make a point, someone wanted to quit smoking, but they're having a hard time. And so we say, well, what are the pros of smoking? Well, I get to be around my friends. It's stress relief, right? And so we're not saying don't quit smoking, or we're not saying quit smoking, like we're not forcing them. When we ask the questions, they actually come up with their own solutions. So, but by not pressuring them to come to what we think is the right decision, but allowing them to come to the conclusion, and maybe they're not ready, right? Like there's I don't know if you've heard of the trans theoretical model of change, which is 5 stages, and it's like first it has to come to our awareness. So that's like stage one. I might not quote these all perfectly because it's been a while since I looked at this, but stage two is we're considering it. We're considering a change, right? And so that might be the point where a coach does come into a teenager's life because they're considering trying to have something change. Stage three is we start taking action. Stage four is we continue the action or we fail and then we go back to right or and then stage five is the maintenance phase. So that's kind of like where I kind of started foundationally with my coaching process. But on top of that, I'm also a life coach. And so I joined what's called the Neuroencoding Institute, which was founded by a guy named Joseph McLennan III, who has been friends and business partners with Tony Robbins for 40 years. And so Joseph has created his own school called and so we're using neuroscience. And so he's the one that taught me all about neuroscience and how the brain is operating. And so basically, we want to create habits. And when we create the good habits, we celebrate those because then by using the brain that we are getting the dopamine hit. You know, everybody's talking about dopamine these days, but we say the goal is to make our bed. If we are wanting to create that as a habit, we need to make sure we say, yay, me, I made my bed today. So that way tomorrow the brain is more likely to want to make the bed because it like, oh, I felt good after I did that. So basically, long story short, I have taken motivational interviewing and the neuroencoding philosophies, combined them together and created kind of, it's not my own process, but it's a process that works so well for teenagers. And then I help the parents with that as well.
You know, there's a coaching organization. Actually, it's the Ziegler Coaching Institute that teaches something about habits that you just it made me think of it. Tom Ziegler, Zig's son, was asked one time when he was speaking, "What's the fastest way to success?" Normally, people ask, "What's the keys to success or steps?" Somebody asked him what the fastest way, and without even thinking, he told me he said to replace a bad habit with a good habit, and he didn't really think what he was saying. And then after they came back from the break, everybody was talking about what he had just said. And he was like, "What did I just say?" And he didn't even know it. But they created a whole model on finding areas of life, using the wheel of life model of, physical, those things, and finding what is a bad habit in each one of those and how can we systematically replace those. And when you were going through that, with that, I was thinking, gosh, that's right in there and helping young people identify what is that bad habit of smoking? How do I get rid of this? Well, sometimes it's not enough just to say get it out. You got to fill that void. So I was thinking that, wow, this has got power in it that really can help them move, and it empowers them because now they know what to do.
And if families knew that, it would reduce a lot of conflict, right? Because parents are frustrated a lot of times. Get off your iPad, get off your phone, get off your video game, do this, do that, da, 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 right? And it's a lot of kind of barking orders at times.
Yeah,
What I find is that if parents knew, oh, instead of just telling them to get off, give them other options. And this is, age
that's it.
dependent, but like you're saying, you have to put something else in its place. So, hey, do you want to come help me cook dinner? Hey, do you want to run to Target with me? Hey, right? Like put things in its place instead of just telling them not to do something.
And that's just that it's empowering for them, as I said, that's just what keeps coming back because now they feel like I have some agency in this. This is my decisions that I'm doing. I'm not just listening to an adult or somebody else. And they feel like I'm empowered to change it and do something positively. So, what are some of the results that you're seeing in this? Because again, there's people listening to us or watching this and they're going, oh, you guys are talking that stuff again and it really doesn't work and you got to process. What are the results that you're seeing? What are some of those tangible results, measurable things? Because there's so many intangible things, unmeasurable things, positive, having a positive attitude, a greater outlook, a growth mindset, those things that are hard to do. But what are some tangible things that a parent can see? Because that's what they want.
Exactly. Well, it all depends on who the client is and what they want. So that's always the first question. What do you want? And so the measurable part is very dependent on what it is that they want. So right now, I have a client who is a freshman in college, and she is struggling to make friends. And so she comes on the session with me last week, and she's like, "Guess what? I have a new friend." That is a tangible, measurable result because we worked with her on how are you going to find friends? How are you going to meet them? How are you going to network with them? How are you going to communicate with them? And so each week we go by, okay, what's the next, what's the goal for this week? She's going to reach out to people in her business club and the other clubs that she's joined, which I helped encourage her to join. So we could measure it in any one of those ways. How many opportunities are you putting yourself in a position this week to be able to connect with somebody? So that would be like one way. Another client that I have happens to also be a freshman in college. I usually work with teen or high schoolers, but I just so happen to have a bunch of college kids right now. And his goals are completely different. His goals are about how he shows up for practice because he's an instrument. That's actually his major. And so how he shows up and he gets nervous and he gets mad when he makes a mistake and he's frustrated. And so that measurable result is how did that practice go? So if I really wanted to, and I don't ask him this because he doesn't need that, but if I needed to, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well did your practice go this week? Oh, it was a 5. What could make it better? Well, what made it a 5 and not a 4? Oh, well, at least I did this time. Oh, that's fantastic. Tell me more about that. Right. So we can measure really almost anything. Like, again, when a client first comes to me and I say, what do you want? It almost always relates back to some form of calmness because of that anxiety or confidence. And that could be confidence relating to competence on, making friends or that performance thing. Like, for example, this musician, we can measure almost any unmeasurable thing by how are you feeling about that on a scale of 1 to 10 right now? How would you like to feel? Where would you like that number to go? Oh, my anxiety is an 8. I wish it were a 3. Okay, how can we get there? See what I'm saying? So even on the growth mindset, you can still measure growth mindset. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you feel like you can learn this algebra problem? Oh, right now I feel like I'm a 2. Okay, how do you think that you could allow your brain to be able to absorb more information? Well, I'm not sure. I don't know. Okay, let's think of some ideas. Could you get a tutor? Could you ask your mom? Could you go ask your teacher for extra work? Could you get on crayon? Whatever, right? So we can measure anything and we can build on any momentum that they might have. And if they're at the negative space, like really negative, like I have no friends, I have no grit, right? Then we start to look at what are their strengths because everybody was born with a set of strengths. Like there's nobody on this planet that doesn't have a strength, multiple strengths, right? And so then, well, I actually kind of funny. Okay, tell me more about that. That sounds like a strength of yours. How could you use that, sense of humor that you have to make a friendship?
When I was looking at your site, I noticed that there were sections in there for parents, there were sections for coaching for boys and coaching for girls. So my first question is that especially on the girls and boys, what are you doing different? How are you approaching those differently? I know
Yeah.
what I think, but I'm curious, what are you doing differently when they come in from that? And then I also want to jump into what are you doing for coaching for parents as well? Because that for the people we have trained as youth life coaches and certified, I tell them that you actually are going to end up, if you have a client for any length of time, there will be a subtle shift over time to where you will be impacting the parent more than you impact the child, the teen more, because that's where the real change is going to happen is how the parent relates to the child. So,
Yeah, all super great questions. As far as my coach approach to boys versus girls, I honestly again, the ball is always in their court,
Ooh,
right?
really?
It's like, what is it that they need? And I say, what would you like to get out of the session? How would you like this session to go? What are you needing? What would make you feel like this session was a win? And so, honestly, in a way, a lot of times it doesn't matter if they're a boy or a girl because I just go off of whatever it is that they're saying. And I have some boys that really do like to talk about their feelings. They really do like to open up. Like maybe I'm the only person that they do open up to, right? So we have that classic, boys don't want to, right? And yeah, maybe that's true. A lot of times I did have several boys for a while where it was very much a methodical approach as far as we were mostly talking about the actions that they needed to take. And, they didn't care to talk about any of the thoughts or the feelings. They just wanted to talk about the actions, right? And that's such a masculine thing because men are doers and they're achievers and they want to go. And so, we can kind of tap into that more if that's their, vibe. So again, I don't necessarily approach it differently for boys versus girls. It's just I let the client I go off of their vibe, what they're needing.
How about parents? What are you doing with parents to help them grow and to help them in this process as well?
Yeah. So parents are tricky. I want to tell you, because most of the time they come to me and they say, "Hey, my kid has this problem. Can you fix the problem and can you fix my kid?" And so there very rarely do I get a parent who is like, "Oh my gosh, I must be doing something wrong. Can you help me figure out how to?" Right? Very rarely does somebody call me and say that. So what we do is I let them know up front that the parent does need to be part of the process. So when I am coaching, I do monthly parent check ins. And so that is a
Mhm.
time where we get together for a short time. We talk about the progress. And by the way, I do set up client confidentiality with my teenage clients. So I want them to know it's a safe place. They can share with me and nothing, if there's anything that they don't want me to discuss with their parents, we talk about that. And I honor that. I'm never going to break that trust that I have with a teenager. But it's more about giving the parents the skills. So a lot of times parents just they don't know what they don't know. And so I help bridge that gap by saying, what would be really helpful for your, son or daughter is if you validated their feelings when they were sharing their stress with you, or if you could empathize with them. And so I helped give them examples like, okay, this is what an empathetic statement sounds like. Does that make sense? They're like, oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So that's how I kind of give them the tools, give them the resources very gently. Cause like I said, they're not always like super open to that feedback. But if it helps their teenager, then they are willing. They are willing. It's just like I have to go about it in a real gentle way.
I love the aspect of having those parent meetings monthly and stuff. That's something that we advocate as well, keeping them abreast, keeping them going forward. If someone wanted to get their child in a coaching program, what would you advise them would be the first steps that they could do to kind of assess whether or not this is the right fit for them? I think it's the right fit for everybody. I think everybody can benefit from coaching, but that we're in that world. Of course, we're going to say that. But what would you advise them the first steps to help them assess, is this right for, Bobby? Is this right for Susie? Is this right for them?
I would just say every coach I know, including myself, does free consultations. And I do free consultation for the parents. And then if they like me and we vibe, then I'll do the free consultation with the teenager as well. And I would just say go with who you feel comfortable with or who your teenager feels comfortable with, because not everybody vibes to not all of us connect in the same way. And so you're going to get the most progress with the person that you feel the most comfortable with or that your teenager feels the most comfortable with. So I would just say, set up a ton of consultations and see who feels good with you. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the questions I get a lot of times is, why is the coaching now a big buzzword? Is, why did it not happen in the 90s? Why didn't it happen in the 80s? Why didn't it happen beforehand? And one of my thoughts, and I want to get your feedback as a professional in this to see if you agree or disagree with me, is during that time period, before maybe even 2000, teachers had more bandwidth in their day to actually, they weren't consciously saying, I am going to be their life coach, but they had enough bandwidth in their day that they could guide their students through some of these things. I taught during the 90s, the entire decade of the 90s. I was, well, not the entire decade, but 10 years, and most of it was in the 90s. I was a teacher. And I felt like I was coaching. Now that I look back, I see I was coaching those kids all the time. My daughter is in her 4th year of teaching, my oldest, and she tells me quite frequently, I don't have time because of the demands put on me. So I feel like that has something to do with it, that we used to have adults who fed into our lives in informal ways that were coaching and they did not realize it. And now we need that formal instruction because there's so much other distractions. Am I on the right track? That's what I tell people. And am I on the right track?
I absolutely agree with you. And I think there's probably even more to it. Like, so for example, I'm not an expert by any means, but I have read that in the Native American culture, when a child turns a certain age, which I don't know if it's 12 or 13, they actually go and live with a different adult in their tribe. And because what's happening is it's a rite of passage where they're becoming an adult. And so we all know that teenagers go through that process where they're forming their own identity, they're becoming their own person. And we know teenagers just naturally don't necessarily want to go to their parents for that advice or the support or the guidance. But having a trusted adult who's a third party who has that child's best interest in mind is so helpful. And so I think just like the idea of having someone that your child can talk to who is a trusted third party. And like you're saying, teachers don't have that bandwidth the way they used to anymore. And that might have been the person that was giving the encouraging word or giving, stay after class, let me talk to you. You look upset today. How can I support you? Things like that. But then I think, where you will probably be going with this is then you add on just kind of the discoveries of, so coaching is really based a lot in principle off of positive psychology. Positive psychology is a newer form of psychology. It started in, I think it's the 90s. We'd have to Google it, by some founders. And so they're the ones that started looking at what's right with people instead of what's wrong with people. And so that's really also, you asked earlier, the difference between coaching and therapy, or if you go to a psychologist or psychiatrist, they're trying to diagnose you. What is wrong with you that we can fix? And how can we
Right.
fix that? Whereas coaching, we're not looking for what's wrong with you. They might come to us for a problem, like, can you help us with that problem? But like I said, for that kid who has now nothing going for him, what are your strengths? I'm kind of funny. Okay, great. Right? I'm looking for what is right with this kid. What can I find that they can perceive as some type of value with them? And so I think kind of the discoveries in psychology is part of it. And then the third thing that it's popping in my head is, just as we know, the development of all this technology and social media, where life was just simpler back before that. It just was. And maybe you were a kid who got bullied, and maybe you did have a little bit of mental health issues, or maybe your parents got divorced, or you had to move a million times. And so there were some kind of mental health challenges. But now more than ever, even a kid who has like good mental health could benefit from a coach. Like I always say, coaching is more of the proactive, the therapy is more of the reactive. Like, let's not wait until things get bad. Let's kind of help them, like, even if they're in a good position, so they can build on that, build the momentum. And that way they'll be feeling good about themselves. Like, right? Anytime you accomplish something, you feel good.
I literally just an hour and a half ago had this same conversation with someone who is going into psychology, getting their master's degree, and we were talking about the difference between therapy and coaching. And the way I kind of framed it for them is, therapy is trying to deal with something that may be holding people back. Maybe it's a trauma, something that happened, something here. Where coaching is forward thinking. We want to find out where they want to go. And a man named David Wright, who developed our curriculum, he developed the Ziegler curriculum. He's a Fortune 50 C-level coach, one of those guys who you can't tell you who his clients are type person. He identifies coaching as, you got to go back to the root word of the word coach. And it originally was a mode of transportation. It came from a little village of Koch that built carriages, and they became known as the Koches, which transliterated to English coaches. So originally the word coach is a transportation. It is something that took you from where you are to where you wanted to go. And if we look at that from a metaphor for coaching, that's what it is. It's identifying, where are you right now? Where do you want to go? And how can I get you there? It's just a mode of
Yes.
transportation. So as coaches,
Right.
we're in the transportation business. That's what we do. We're in the
Yeah.
transportation business.
I
So
love that.
I love that. Get me excited. And it's not just the energy drink I had before this call that's get me excited. Of course, that's helping. All right.
Yeah. I'm with you.
How can our audience find you? Where can they find you? How can they get connected with you? Socials, all that kind of stuff. Where can they find Laura?
Yes, there we go. Positivelyhealthycoaching.com is my website, and that has the links to my socials. So that's like probably the easiest way to do it. Or, just on Instagram, Positively Healthy Coaching is also my handle. So you can find me that way. But yeah, just my website. And yeah, I have, links to free consultations like we talked about, and also free downloads, just all sorts of resources. I have a big blog. I love to blog about things. So lots of
Mm.
resources there as well. Yep.
Ooh, I love bloggers. I love folks who blog, podcasting, blogging. I love those kind of people that are
Yeah,
related there. So if they reached out to you, you got a free consultation into them, and they can connect with you on site there. So, uh,
absolutely.
however, it was orchestrated for us to get together. I am excited about it.
Me
If you
too.
saw my notes, you would see that there are several things that I've written down quite extensively about things that I would like to connect with offline about how we can continue this. Thank you. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for being a part of our show today. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been wonderful.
And listen, audience, if you wanted to connect with Laura, you can look in our show notes and you'll find all the links that it'll have. So if you're listening, just go to your favorite app. You'll see it there. If you're watching this on YouTube, just look down and you can hit the thing button and you'll see all the live links there. And if you have stayed with us for almost 35 minutes, you've obviously found some value in what you have heard today, or you left it on by mistake. Whatever it is, you're still here. And we want you to do three things that mean a lot to us. Number one, like this podcast so that more people can hear this conversation. To comment on it. We'd love to hear us, or send us an email, or contact, message us some way so that you know that there was something of value here. But this is the most important one. There is someone who does not know about this episode, and connecting with Laura or connecting with a life coach for their young person is what they need. So please share this episode with a person that you know that needs this message, so that we can help you thrive. We can help them be happy, healthy, and more confident. So thank you again, Laura, for your time. And thank you again, audience.
Thank you.
And we'll see everybody back real soon on another episode of the Generation Youth Podcast.